Good afternoon and welcome to the very first podcast, and YouTube for that matter, of the Ken Fletcher, Hugh Lunn and Chuck Feeney Queensland Greats YouTube channel. And the material that this podcast has been made up from was from interviews back in 2014, just prior to the official opening of Frew Park. And so the material relates to that particular time frame, as I need to tell you that when you hear Jeffery Roger Rowe, who's a very entertaining interlocutor, talk about a script for the movie The Great Fletch, that due to COVID, more than anything else, has not actually proceeded to a complete and ready to shoot movie script, which is a great shame, I suspect. However, I know that Hugh will have it in his knapsack as one of the many projects that he has that he wants to complete, and so it should be. It's a great book, and I'm sure it would make a great movie. So, enjoy this podcast. Behind us here is the Wendy Turnbull Green, and Wendy, I know that you love looking at your green. And you can see it's actually got grass now. And with us today, Hugh Lunn, famous author of the book The Great Fletch, and Jeffery Roger Rowe, who you've seen on the YouTube channel previously, who is the scriptwriter of the movie The Great Fletch. Now, so this morning's task is tying in the progress of the movie as we talk about the progress of Brisbane's latest addition to the tennis narrative, Frew Park. So, which one? Who's going to give us an update?
I'll first say that this is the old Milton Tennis Centre right there, and where that shed is where the centre court was, and that's where Kenny Fletcher used to play, and Frankie Gorman whacked the balls up this street. About 2 blocks they went from the green. And so it's because of the antics of people like Frankie Gorman, Kenny Fletcher, and this is the world who admired them and watched Fletch play all those Wimbledon finals, that this is where he came from, and this is where all those Queenslanders, Laver and Emerson and Anderson and Fletcher and Gorman, learnt to play right there.
That's a great piece of history. Jeffery, you're a man of many articulate words.
Well, Hugh would say, correctly said, Ken Fletcher was the best tennis player to come from Brisbane.
That's true.
So what I'm confronted with here, but in a good way, and as is part of the script as it's developing, we have this character that is Brisbane itself. And of course, as we all know, the G20 is going to be here in November, and to me that's an ultimate maturity of Brisbane, if you like. But in our own backyard we have the tennis courts happening, and we've got Frankie Gorman hitting tennis balls out of here. We've got an old building here that used to service rock and roll, and the Platters, I believe.
Well, I went to see the Platters in the grandstands there. There was the only wooden tennis centre in the world, because the air used to blow through it, and when they weren't playing tennis there, they'd put on big shows that came to Brisbane, and I saw Johnny O'Keefe there, and I saw the Platters there, and other people saw the Rolling. Was it you who saw the Rolling Stones?
No, my eldest brother did.
Yeah.
Deep Purple as well. Anyway, the short of the question is what it all infers is that there's a great complexity, that you have a story about this Brisbane tennis player, the best tennis player to come from Brisbane. You have this character Brisbane, and there's this great maturity, but there's a great complexity with all the characters, and Rod Laver, Roy Emerson, Daphne Fancutt,
John Newcombe.
Yeah, it's a great narrative, absolutely fantastic narrative. And so the movie is inching ever so slowly to being up on the big screen.
Well, Peter, it's being scripted as we speak, but we're getting closer to the idea that it could be really best serviced as being a 3-part television delivery, perhaps even more because there is such a complexity to the story.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Absolutely.
And you could have the 3 parts: game, set, and match.
Just like your book.
Yeah, and people all around the world remember Kenny Fletcher because he won titles in the Philippines and in Czechoslovakia and in Germany and in South America, and so there are people all around in every country of the world, and he played in every country, and they know him, and he came from Brisbane, and he was unbeatable. Everyone said Fletch is unbeatable. We all knew he was unbeatable, and he went up to Central Queensland to play in the championship, and some bloke beat him. No one could believe it. We thought he must have been sick or in hospital or something, and it was a bloke 2 years older than him, called, we hadn't heard of before. It was the junior title, called Rod Laver, and Rod Laver became Kenny's nemesis, which would be part of your script, I imagine, Jeff.
No, actually his nemesis is John Newcombe, funnily enough.
Well, John Newcombe was 2 years like behind him. He was caught between Laver and Newcombe.
Yeah, but John Newcombe's kind of like the Iago to Fletcher's Othello sort of thing.
Oh,
that's a backhanded way of saying it. It's not like he's an out-and-out bastard. I don't know the guy.
Poor old Newt. Well, he's a nice guy.
He just services the film very well, as you said. I mean, Rod Laver, that's an interesting call.
Okay.
So, as you can see, this is a fascinating tale, and it is woven into this great Brisbane narrative for tennis that's been emerging over the last couple of years.
G'day, I'm Hugh Lunn, and I'm here above where the Milton tennis courts used to be, and we all call them Milton, but in fact there are a couple of parks made up the Milton Tennis Centre, and one of them was Frew, but we've since found out there's more to it than that, and so I'm going to get the bloke who's behind these more than 100 YouTube films about the history of tennis in Brisbane, Peter Rasey, to tell us about something interesting about the park, about a bloke called Savile Sheed.
Yep.
Peter.
And before we start on that, Jeffrey, you've got an interesting little story about the French and how they view names, don't you?
Well, yes. Traditionally in France, it's recognised that if your first initial of your Christian name and the first initial of your surname is the same, it usually is a predestination to greatness.
And that is a great little story, because when you have a look at the tennis history, you've got Herbert Rowe, who came to Brisbane in 1896, 1 year before Wimbledon began its auspicious history, and he brought the game of tennis to Brisbane Grammar School as the principal, and he then was the driving force to get tennis up and going in Queensland, and Frew Park was established in 1915, so next year 100 years, and it originally started out as the Queensland Lawn Tennis Association, which was basically from where that water tank is to Milton Road, and they then built a complex there, and this other part was still a swamp, Red Jacket Swamp. And then about 1920, what was called the Suburban Tennis Association, the Hardcourt Tennis Association in effect, then acquired that land, and the driving person behind it all was Savile Sheed. And so they filled in Red Jacket Swamp at this half of Milton here, and in recognition of the huge amount of work that Savile Sheed did, they named the park at this half of the Milton Tennis Complex Sheed Park. And right here, and Hugh will be able to confirm this, was one of the main entrances, but the name Sheed Park was up in big bold letters at the end of Lucy Street here, where we're currently standing. And it's really Frew and Sheed were the driving force that put the infrastructure in, so that when the 1950s and 60s arrived and these great talented tennis players then started to stride the world, they were doing it on the legwork and the hard work that was put in by those two tennis administrators. And it's just an absolutely fascinating bit of tennis history, and I've been drilled into me how important it is by one of Saville's relatives, Dennis Sheed, but also by a very driven individual by the name of Dot Deacon, who really brought to my attention in the most forceful way imaginable, but in a good forceful way, the importance. And I took on board the message, and I went to Mark Bloomberg, who's the operator, and the complex, the new building, it's got a beautiful big deck, and so that deck is going to be named Sheed Deck in honour of Saville Sheed, and in recognition of the fact that Milton was in actual fact 3 parks. There was Sheed Park, Frew Park, and then across the road there was the Junior Park. And it's no wonder that people in the 50s and 60s looked at the tennis facility here and they thought of it as the Milton Tennis Centre, where in actual fact it was 3 individual parks.
Well, the thing was too, Peter, that without Milton Tennis Centre, the world would never have had Rod Laver, would never have had Roy Emerson, would never have had Mel Anderson, and it certainly would never have had Ken Fletcher, because they came out here and practiced. And the essential difference between the Sheed part and the Frew part was that the Frew part was all lawn tennis courts, which people said that the Milton Centre Court was second only to Wimbledon as the best grass court in the world, with the huge wooden grandstands around. But the back half, the Sheed part, was all ant-bed hard courts. And so when Brisbane ordinary tennis players played competition and played each other, we played out on the Sheed part. And Laver and Emerson and Fletcher and Anderson, they played on the lawn court part, and that's why they were able to go over to Wimbledon and give everyone a big hurry up. That was the secret.
Because they were used to the grass.
Yeah, they were great on grass.
Yeah, and there's more than 100 YouTubes now of history of fantastic interviews with Ashley Cooper and Wendy Turnbull and Daphne Fancutt, and also Faye Muller. There's a couple with Faye.
Yeah, they're really good.
And they really bring to light how important that grass surface was.
And I must tell people this about tennis, is that some people are really good tennis players on grass and hopeless on slow courts like clay or granite or ant-bed. The Americans were really good on cement because the bounce was so true, but they weren't so good on grass where it could skid through. And Wimbledon, I've played on the grass at Wimbledon, it's like throwing a golf ball onto a wooden floor. It comes off so fast. And people don't realise that. It was the same here at Milton. So you've got to be an excellent player to play on such a quick surface. And the great thing about Ken Fletcher was that probably ahead of all those players except maybe Laver, he was equally good on all surfaces. And that's why he's the only foreigner who was able to go to the Philippines and twice win their title on crushed coral, because people would go there and lose love and love, because the Filipinos could play on crushed coral and nobody else could.
But he was also pretty good on playing on dried cow dung, wasn't he?
Well, yes, Fletch played Ramanathan Krishnan, the famous Indian champion tennis player, in Bombay on a cow dung court, because that's what they made. They put down the cow dung and wet it, and he went out there, and it was hotter than it is here today. It was about 100 degrees, and Ken was out there, and it was 2 sets all, and Fletch never trained, he just played, and he was starting to wilt, and there's vultures in Bombay, and they were on the wires of the lights over the court, even though it was daytime. And he came over the side, and he said to me, he said, "Guys, I don't know what I'm going to do." And the sweat was right. He said, I'm rooted. And he said, I can't keep going. He said that the trouble is, if I fall over, I'll get tetanus. And if I don't get up, those bloody vultures are going to eat me.
Yeah, that's a fantastic story. Now, we just might conclude off on this little bit, because Jeffrey's always, he's never short of a really good, pithy word. And so I'm going to throw him in the deep end here, and so you can have a concluding comment.
On Saville?
Yes.
On Saville particularly?
No, not on Saville particularly.
On good ideas for Brisbane.
Good ideas for Brisbane? They never come from Brisbane?
You've forgotten the story. What we'll do, we'll finish off this little bit. We'll refresh everyone's memory, and we'll come back because we still have a couple of more little YouTubes here to film. And it is, I can tell you now, this is just beautiful weather. It's not too hot, and it's not too cool.
And there's no vultures.
There's no vultures. We did have a helicopter before. And we've got the Mission Impossible theme.
No! Get smart!
Get smart, how silly am I? And the interesting thing is that music is actually coming from the Milton State School. And the Milton State School have 3 schools. Rod Labour School, Wendy Turnbull School, and Mal Anderson
Oh, I never knew that.
Not schools, houses. So how's that for leaving a mentoring message behind of all those young kids about how important tennis has been in the Brisbane history?
Well, in the 1960s, Queensland dominated world tennis. It's that simple. You know, Mal Anderson won the US Open. John Barrett, the voice of Wimbledon, said that Ken Fletcher dominated Wimbledon in the 60s. Labour was killing everyone in the 60s, and they were all familiar.
No.
I'm Jeffery Roger Rowe. I am a script writer, and I am adapting, or as I prefer to call it these days, basing a script on Hugh Lunn's great book, The Great Fletch. I am flanked by Peter Rasey, as viewers probably realise. Peter, this morning you told me about being on 4BC, a radio station here in Brisbane.
Yep.
And
I'm not a pratter myself. Yep.
a Pratt.
Yep, Pratt.
That seems to be an easy role for you to fall into. Was there some sort of altercation or something or other about a major player, and there's a bit of a double entendre for outside viewers, a fellow called Stefan, who is a Queenslander of the Year.
He's a Queensland great. Last
Icon.
year,
He's an icon, definitely.
He is, very much so. So what happened was this morning, pre-arranged, have a press release on the announcement of the Rod Labour footbridge, and as part of the parcel that we'll be talking about in the next YouTube, the tennis narrative has been slowly but surely built, and Stefan donated the key piece of the physical infrastructure here, which is the Stefan racket. And when the Stefan racket was up at Milton, Stefan, in his very organised and highly efficient marketing mode, had Stefan balls. They're about a 2-metre ball, 2-metre ball, go up at all these tennis.
They were golden.
No, they were white actually. So this morning, of course, I fell into the trap of saying that the last remaining Stefan ball, and of course immediately Stefan leapt to protect himself by saying, no, I still have 2. Well, I felt a complete and utter goose and just was almost rolling around the floor in laughter. And it is just another piece of great history. So with that, I'll say good morning, because that truck is really drowning us out. Thank you.
But we are in Brisbane, and progress never stops in the home state.
That's very true, very true. Thank you. Interviews as well, but not at the dedicated and at the sometimes crippling pace that they've occurred over the last 6 months. And with that, I'll say good afternoon and thank you again, both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.